Is the live-action How to Train Your Dragon basically a shot-for-shot remake of the animated film from 2010? That's what the streets are saying, and the streets be right. But is that a bad thing? I actually don't think that it ends up being a bad thing, because you still have breathtaking flying sequences, a score that is just as magical as it originally was. That music, boy. Wow, when they pump that in and they're flying around in IMAX, you can't beat that. Strong, important, heartfelt messages that remain intact. A dragon just as cute, if not cuter, in live action, and a rising star in Mason Thames. This guy's going places, and not just on a dragon, although to some degree on a dragon, because this movie might be everybody, I think a lot of us thought he was quite good in Black Phone, but he was a child actor there. I think very much here he is becoming an adult star. He has major Zac Efron vibes. James Gunn, if you're still making your Bat Family movie, we found your Nightwing. In fact, though, James Gunn will have to act quickly because a lot of studios are taking a hard look at Mason Thames. There's a rumor going around that Sony wants him to be Link in Zelda. And Universal, of course, is very eager to get started on How to Train Your Dragon 2 in live action. Now, I wasn't sure if Thames was a rising star before seeing this movie. I wasn't really seeing it, and I wasn't even seeing it when this movie started. But about halfway through, and I wasn't even sure they should have cast him as Hiccup, but halfway through, his on-screen charisma was so strong that I was like, you gotta cast him. He's incredible here. He's really good. He is, I think, definitely. Just because you're movie star material doesn't always mean it's gonna happen, but I mean, he has the best shot possible. Very, very strong. We'll see if this and Black Phone 2, coming out later this year, also from Universal, can do the trick. We'll see if Universal sews him up as an in-house talent, but he's incredible. So, as I said, it's not bad for this to be a shot-for-shot remake. I'll actually take it, and let me explain. Disney live-action adaptations, which of course started this whole thing, and DreamWorks was like, they sure are making a lot of money over there. Let's do ours. So Disney live-action adaptations either add to the original story, or, as we saw with Lilo and Stitch, strip out all the guts. But in both cases, for the most part, and I've even liked some of the Disney live-action adaptations, but they come across as business decisions more so than creative ones, driving IP rather than story and message. And to be fair, Universal is driving some IP here as well. How to Train Your Dragon is a huge brand for the studio, not just with movies and shows, but also they just opened Epic Universe down in Orlando, which has a How to Train Your Dragon land. But what's interesting is that while this live action film is a visual duplicate of the animated one, it also manages to recreate the heart and messages as well. So it very much feels like a real movie, like its own movie. Plus, fascinatingly, the story actually hits a little bit different in live action. For instance, in live action, the dragons come across as more threatening. They're scarier. Toothless, adorable and scary, and also, oh so powerful. Oh, this dragon can move. He is a night fury. And while things got pretty serious in the animated film and the stakes were pretty darn high, in live action, the story often feels even more serious and the stakes even higher. Whereas the animated film was charming, in live action, you very much feel like you're part of the story, that you're up there on that dragon as well. That's pretty cool. And kids have always been drawn to darker stories. They make the biggest impression and really stick with you. Children respect adults who are truthful with them and who treat them with respect. As I watched this new How to Train Your Dragon, I thought it was so nice that a new generation of young moviegoers would have this new, darker, and even more thrilling film to experience. That again, in many places hits even harder. And this film, in fact, reminds me of some of the now classic films of the 1980s that shaped a generation of younger moviegoers. Films like Flight of the Navigator and War Games. Those are amazing films. And this new How to Train Your Dragon feels very much like those films. High praise indeed, as anyone knows who has seen Flight of the Navigator and War Games. Universal let press bring kids to the screening, and so therefore there were a number of kids at the press screening I attended, and they were absolutely glued to the screen. I mean, a lot of them were How to Train Your Dragon super fans. They came with all the appropriate accoutrements as a fan. But for instance, at one point, a dad took his tween son on a bathroom break during the movie, and when they came back, this tween boy ran back to his seat and not like cutely, but like urgently asked, what did he miss? It was really great. Plus, the wonderful thing about sophisticated family films is that everyone can enjoy them of all ages. And at the end of the screening, the entire audience, including myself, burst into applause. But the movie's not perfect. Oh, look at some of you so excited to hear the bad parts. But before I pour the tea, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you're always here when I pour the tea. So when the movie started, I was nervous. I was like, maybe this movie's going to suck because the colors were particularly drab, although that's an intentional artistic choice on the part of Dean DeBlois in the animated film and now the live action. To when things get particularly serious, you'll notice that the colors get more bleak because it's a tough time. All the color is sucked out of the world as things get more serious. But I wasn't really feeling that. I just felt it was drab at the beginning. And the VFX, not as sharp as I would have liked. And the movie seemed a little bit rushed. I was like, I don't know about this. And I was really not feeling Mason Thames as Hiccup, a role that Jay Baruchel originated and has voiced now for decades. And some fans, I can understand why, I think they have a point, have felt a little bad that Jay Baruchel hasn't been invited to be a part of this party. Even though he's not in the new movie, he, of course, has kept this franchise alive for years. And there's a large part of the reason that they can now make a live action movie. But he's nowhere to be seen. Poor Jay Baruchel. He's still getting paid, though, I'm sure, for all the other things, royalties. All right, so Thames, though, the reason I didn't think he was well cast, and I talked about this when I reacted to the trailers, is that he just doesn't seem like a nerd to me, no matter how silly they try to make his hair. They're like, but look at his hat hair. And you're like, he's just a jock with hat hair. But as the movie progressed, I realized that they were doing something a little different with Hiccup here, and perhaps something they've always tried to do with the character. But I think with Thames' casting and his more nuanced performance, the situation becomes, I think, not only more complex, but more widely relatable. So Thames' Hiccup could be popular. He could be a jock, but he can't because he thinks differently and therefore he can't help it. And so therefore he feels differently and he believes in something different than his father and his people. And I think that becomes a very relatable message to multiple groups of people. And I think it's very, very powerful. He has one particular conversation with his dad about where his dad, is saying, you're a Viking and you have to think and act and do everything that we have done for centuries. And I thought that really, as someone who likes to be a disruptor, that really struck a chord with me. And of course, the heart of the original film remains the same. And that's the message that while Hiccup might be different than his fellow Vikings, that doesn't mean he's still not an asset to the clan. And that maybe, just maybe, considering different perspectives can not only change your own life, but can change the world. But while Thames' Hiccup is a wonderful coming-of-age story and Nico Parker is also age-appropriate for her role, the casting of the other young Vikings is kind of ridiculous. Many of them are way too old to be playing teenagers, even by Hollywood standards, although some of them are said to have been held back. I'm like, what, for 10 years? And their jokes do not work, instead coming across as stale and corny. For a group of Vikings that are described as the popular kids at the start of the movie, they do not come across that way at all, but they don't even come across as interesting or standing proud in other ways. They don't really work. This movie was filmed after the strikes, so they could have improvised on set, and I wish they would have, because I think it would have given the training sequences a more natural feel. Instead, outside of Thames and Parker's performances, those sequences feel very stilted. But something interesting about this young Viking clan did occur to me while watching the live-action movie. In live action, this turns into Top Gun for kids. Oh, I love it. That's a perfect way to describe it. And how cool is it for kids to have their own Top Gun? You've got your Maverick and the competition among the pilots to be the best in the group. And even the flirtatious banter between Hiccup and Astrid has similar qualities to the banter from the original Top Gun film. Here, our dragon riders come across even more like a Viking Air Force, and I often felt Hiccup was like a fighter pilot, the way he acted. And it's very much to the movie's credit that the flying sequences here can be compared to the flying sequences in both Top Gun movies. And we saw it in IMAX. It was a smaller IMAX, but it was an IMAX nonetheless, and the sequences were just incredible. And as I said, you feel more than ever that you're up there on Toothless as well, taking to the skies. It's amazing. Those sequences were incredible, of course, in the original animated film, but they level up even more so here in live action, thanks to very good VFX in these sequences. These are sharp, super sharp, and gorgeously rendered, and great green screen acting from Thames. Also, in addition to the action, the movie focuses even more so on Hiccup's inventions, not only in terms of their intricate design, but how hard it is to make them. In the animated movie, you don't really feel the weight of of Toothless's, additional tail. But here, that thing is huge, and it's made of metal and leather, and Thames really has to struggle to work with it. And it makes it not only seem more real, but therefore more powerful when it's used. I think that was really effective. Nico Parker does a fine job as Astrid, but she doesn't exude, at least not here, the same level of confidence and personality that her mother, Thandiwe Newton, has done so well in Westworld. Thandiwe Newton became one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character, on that show. But I have a theory on why Parker's performance is off here, so hear me out. Now, she looks amazing, very Viking chic in her outfits, and she has quite a number of costume changes. And she's very good at her few action sequences. They give Astrid some great and clever moves, and Parker, or her stunt double, but you can't tell, execute them quite well. Now, there's been talk about how they decided to make Astrid even more ambitious here, and she outright tells Hiccup that she has her sights on being chief one day. They talk about, they have a diverse group of Vikings here, but they address that, and they say that these are all the greatest warriors who want to fight dragons from around the globe, who've all come to Berk because they want to fight dragons. And so that really is why you have a diverse community here. And so Astrid, now played by Nico Parker, really wants to prove herself. And she wants to prove herself not just by being a great dragon fighter, but by becoming someday chief of this new clan. And I think Parker very much embodies that for the first half of the film. However, as the film progresses, she still finds herself being moved into the traditional girlfriend role, which is fine. It's fine, but now it doesn't match how ambitious she is in the first half of the film. It's not realistic that a woman so ambitious and so driven would totally set all of that aside, and so quickly. And I think that conflict in the role that's now been created is why Parker, a young actress, doesn't quite know how to wrestle with that and to portray that transition, because it's not in the script, and so it falls all on her. And I think considering her age and lack of experience as an actress, I think in that regard, when you take all that into account, she actually does quite a good job. Gerard Butler is just the right combination of cartoonish bluster, but also very real father-son emotions. His scenes are really beautiful. He, of course, reprises his role as Stoic the Vast, which he voiced in the animated films, and it was really a great get for this live-action version that they were able to keep Gerard Butler. Dean DeBlois has said he'd love for Cate Blanchett, to return for the sequel as Hiccup's mother. Although, interestingly, Nick Frost has a little bit too much heart as Gobber, and he's missing the crazed manic quality that Craig Ferguson brought to the role as a voice actor. Also, Peter Serafinowicz can be so funny. I still to this day remember how hilarious he was in Spy. But here, he's largely wasted. I kept waiting for him to do something, and he never did. The dragons are fantastic, though. The dragon that lights itself on fire, amazing! Wow, did that look great. In live action, the more ferocious dragons translate the best. The third level boss dragon, wowie wow wow. As for the other dragons, they are very well realized from the source material, but in live action, some of them, at least to me, seemed a little bit too silly. And this movie, though, even more so than the animated one, really leans into the fan aspects of the dragons. You know, talking about the power levels that they have in different regards, jaw power, fire power, what they do to their enemies, stuff like that. And they even, you know, of course, have trading cards, like briefly introduced, you know, a real collect them all kind of feel, which I think was nice. It really worked. And then at the same time, while it has those elements, they still have really cool action sequences, particularly in the third act, for kids to get really excited about and to imagine that they're actually in there as well. Who wouldn't want to ride these dragons into battle? It's amazing. And just like the live action transformation of Stitch was crucial to that film's success, Toothless, also co-created by Chris Sanders, and therefore with a similar look, makes the jump to live action just as successfully. In some ways, I feel even more successfully. Because as many of you know from my Lilo and Stitch review, I was frustrated that Disney's live action version took on so many dog-like qualities, in a dismissive way, becoming less human as a result. So I was thrilled to see that Hiccup is just as smart as he's always been. Not a pet for Hiccup, but more of a partner. And I really love that dynamic. Of course, in real life, some people also view their pets more as partners. And I think that How to Train Your Dragon has that mentality of someone who thinks of their pet in many ways as a peer. And that's the approach that I prefer. Toothless's personality is not only wonderfully intact here, but his movements are improved. As I said, he seems more dangerous, and as a result, his choice to be kinder stands out even more. Physically, he's incredibly well realized as well, from his dragon skin, to his claws, to his teeth, his retractable teeth, to his eyes. His eyes are still, just as they were in animation, wonderfully and incredibly expressive. Live action Toothless and Mason Thames' Hiccup are quite the duo. I think the key to this live action adaptation's success is retaining Dean DeBlois. They had to threaten him to get him to do it. They were like, if you don't do it, someone else will. And I think based on the way Lilo and Stitch turned out, I mean, it's making a lot of money, but creatively, I think there's a lot of problems there. I think Dean DeBlois was right to be worried about this in someone else's hands, and I'm glad he didn't let that happen. DeBlois co-created the animated franchise along with Chris Sanders, and then he took it over solo, just like Chad Stahelski eventually took John Wick over all by himself. And having DeBlois write and direct this live-action adaptation is why I think it's kept what made the first film so special. And while the nuances and the additions are very subtle, on screen, I think emotionally you feel them quite substantially. DeBlois has been living and breathing How to Train Your Dragon for over 20 years at this point. It's basically all that he does. He makes these animated movies. And he's also a very out and proud gay man. And I think that he's put a lot of his own experiences and feelings about his complicated feelings about community, both good and bad, into the work, not only originally, but in this film as well. I think maybe because it's live action and, Mason Thames is, pretty much becoming an adult. I think DeBlois put a little more a nuance in here. Like, it can speak to kids, but it can also speak to adults even more so. And I think for that reason, this live action How to Train Your Dragon feels incredibly authentic, not just to the source material, but to itself. That is the best thing I can say about the movie, and that is that it can stand on its own. With Disney live action adaptations, you don't really get the complete picture unless you look at both films, the animated original and the live action adaptation. They're a set. They really have to be seen and experienced together. Like, if you just watch the live action, you'd be like, well, you need to see the animated to totally understand what they're trying to do here. But here, this film, while of course the original animated film is still incredible, you don't need to have ever seen it to appreciate the sophistication of this story and to see what they're trying to do here and what they succeed in doing. So that's my review of How to Train Your Dragon live action. It's already playing in some parts of the world, and it'll hit theaters in North America this weekend. I was very skeptical, but I ended up really having a good time. And I really recommend seeing it on the biggest screen that you can to truly be able to be immersed in those flying sequences. All right, so that's my review of How to Train Your Dragon. Share your own thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.